Welcome to the Movement Minutes with your host, Reed Nellis. Here, we pursue the human connection. We learn how to empower one another. We discuss clinical pearls. We discover our passions. We reflect on our capacity to achieve. We remain open to novel trends and concepts because regardless of our backgrounds or experiences, our successes or failures, we all speak the same language, human movement. All right, we're back. So about a week or two ago, I reached out on Instagram, threw a little quiz poll up there, and said, what do you guys want to learn? Ask me in anything of sort. I need to record a podcast. What do you guys want to hear about? So this is first and foremost a thank you to all of you who answered that. There was like 20 some responses, which some overlapped concepts and topics we want to chat about. So we'll kind of hopefully hit all of those. But I did jot them all down. So I got a spreadsheet in front of me. This might take 20 minutes. This might take an hour. I have no clue what's ahead of me here, but I did throw all the questions up or all the responses up here. And maybe if you're watching this instead of listening to this, the video version, I might throw up the question and who it's from. I don't know if that's allowed or I don't know how I'm going to do that, but we'll see how it goes, right? So let's dive into it. The first question that was brought up, or the first response, so I did these in order, so no specific order here, was thoughts on subluxation-based chiros and how can we all integrate or work with each other. So for me, and for those who you don't know, I'm not a subluxation-based chiro. I don't really think of people as these building blocks that we need to put back together to restore the nervous system and all this other stuff. That being said, I don't want this to come off as bashing because a younger me would have bashed that idea. I did for many years. At the end of the day, those individuals, those providers are still getting people better. Look at some of the individuals that I've worked with in the past who have been in business for 40 years. You don't stay in business for 40 years by not helping people, right? So clearly they're getting results. Now, where I still will bash people on this and bash providers on this is if it's only via fear-mongering or financially driven tactics, right? So we see this a little bit in chiropractic, especially where chiropractors fearmonger and drive people into these payment plans without the actual need of care, right? And it's seldom payment. I'm not against payment plans at all, right? I have a couple clients that are on payment plans or program plans or however you want to call it. It's just the idea of fear-mongering people into, I'm the only thing that can fix your back or fix your neck or fix your knee or whatever that is. That's where I stay away. Now, that being said, it sounds like I'm bashing thus far, but I actually love subluxation-based chiros, right? They're good at what they do. Like I said, they've been in business for a long time. But most of my patients see another chiropractor. I'm a chiropractor. They see another chiropractor. I don't view that as competition. If they want to see another chiropractor because that person takes their insurance, great. Because that person adjusts them with 5-minute adjustments, they're quick in and out because it's next to work or next to their house, great, fantastic. I'll happily be the other guy, right? So for those of you listening, I put finger quotes around the other guy. I think as an eternal optimist that I am, to put a optimistic rose-colored glasses spin on it, I see one of my biggest referral sources being other chiropractors. A lot of other chiropractors, subluxation-based chiros, don't want to do muscle work, don't want to do corrective exercises or at-home strategies with their patients. Perfect. I love that stuff. Send them over to me. Let's get them together on a cohesive front, right? And so to answer the question, how can we integrate and work with each other? That's how I work with it, is we're all working on different parts of that same human. This is my role. This might be your role or your idea and thought. Let's all work together on the ultimate goal of getting that person feeling and moving better. Next one up on here was how to avoid shit contracts. So I'm guessing this is being asked by a new grad or recent grad or about to be grad. But the biggest thing I can say is take your time. Every single thing on the contract is negotiable, okay? Ask other people. Ask me for all I care. I'm more than happy to answer these questions and help you along with these contract negotiations of what to look for. Because especially if you're a new grad, the biggest contract you probably signed is I will not sue Applebee's serving here if I get burnt or something, right? So all the legal minutia and stuff is very hard to delve into. So ask and question every single thing on that contract, right? The other side of that, and I don't know if this is what that individual is asking, is why are there so many shit contracts in therapy? And this doesn't go specifically for chiropractors. This is massage therapists, OTs, PTs to a heavy degree. I don't know. I don't want to. I don't want to blame the schools, right? The school's job is to get you to graduate and get your degree and pass your boards. Whether that's PT, ATC, OT, chiropractic, their job is to get you a job, right? Their job is not to make sure that you get paid at your job. And we could dive into the whole like student loans idea and all that stuff, but I really don't know the answer to that and why it's a systemic problem of graduating grad school with $250,000 in debt and getting a $35,000 a year job. I don't know why that is, and I don't have the answer for that. Maybe in a future life that'll be my crusade, but right now I've got enough on my plate. So hopefully that helps answer that one. Info for new grads, specifically on marketing and learning the business side of things. Give yourself grace, okay? Give yourself the grace to allowingly fail miserably. And I think understanding and appreciating and acknowledging that you will fail, and I almost hope you fail to a certain degree so that we can learn from that, or at least this was my learning style. But give yourself the grace to do so, because if you attack yourself after every failure you make, which I've done in the past too, I'm not perfect, as you all know. If you attack yourself, you're just going to get beat up internally, and that's just not a good place to learn from, right? There was many times, at least a half a dozen times, where I'd go home just bawling, not to anybody because I'd cry in a corner, but I just sob, right? Because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And you come through it, right? It's just try everything. And that kind of brings me to the next point is try everything. At one point when I was down in Colorado, as big of a douche move as this sounds to admit, I actually printed off about 1,500 like door hanger flyer things that were like, hey, I'm new to town, come see me and give me your money and let me help you get better. But yeah, doorknob hangers, 1,500 of them. I walked around town hanging them on any single door that didn't have a non-solicitation sign out in front of it. Of course, as I predicted, that didn't work out well. I don't think I got a single patient from that, but it was a learning maneuver, right? We learned that that marketing tactic did not work for me. And again, I did not like that marketing tactic anyways, but it was told to us in school to try. So I was like, I don't know, I'll try anything. But I think that's the biggest part is try anything. Oh yeah, for as the business side of things, learn, ask questions, and be the stupidest person in the room. It's totally okay, especially if you're a new grad or in a new contract, or you just went from an associateship or outpatient PT to an inpatient PT or an outpatient to a private practice, or any transitions that you guys have. You're not the first person to do it, and don't assume that people are going to think of you differently. Your peers and colleagues think of you differently because you don't know what to do with that next step. They didn't either, and at least this is my stance on it. I screwed up a lot of things. I've failed miserably to the extent of about a 50 grand, if not, I don't even want to admit this, but potentially like 150 grand failure, okay? So I learned from those, and I'm more than happy to share my experience of how not to do that so you don't lose that amount of money. But be okay with admitting that you don't know anything, or at least everything, right? Next one here is pain science, and I know exactly who asked this, so I hope I answer this adequately for you. But man, oh man, this concept is a full podcast in and of itself. The idea around pain science right now is possibly the best analogy is like understanding the depths of the ocean or space, right? It's such a growing, evolving area of care, and it's super interesting for that reason. I think it could be overwhelming for that reason to some, and me included. But at least acknowledging it and appreciating that there's different research coming out with pain science, and it's not what we thought it was in the past. To give Mike Stella some credit, like the end of the ice age, like that's a great synopsis right there of like the rest, ice, compression, elevation thing. That's out the window big time, and icing everything because it hurts is not the answer. But pain science, expounding upon that, to me, I take that, or the two avenues that I've been really interested in lately, is both touch science and the biopsychosocial model, especially as it relates to communication. So with that biopsychosocial model, what that is, if you're not familiar with it, is there's a biological pain, and there's a psychological pain, and there's a social pain, or an aspect of those as it may relate to your pain. So the best explanation that I could have is take a elite soccer athlete who rolls their ankle and breaks their ankle. let's say they're in high school, right? They lose their scholarship, so there's emotional pain and psychological pain. They're spending time with me on the PT chiropractic table, or you guys with that, not in the locker room or on the pitch with their friends. So they're losing the social aspect of that, and that all drives into their biological pain. Now, on the flip side, take me, who does the exact same injury, the same exact diagnosis. I can still work, I can still play, I can still do stuff that I enjoy to the most part until that thing heals. I'm not going to be as emotionally or psychologically or socially affected by that, right? So the same or two different individuals with the same diagnosis can have vastly different experiences and relationships with their pain. So that biopsychosocial realm and its communication as therapists around that is super interesting. Really being able to connect with them and learn their story and really ask open-ended questions. I just got off a phone call earlier this morning with a patient who I haven't even seen yet. Her and I have been contacting each other back and forth for like 3 weeks, just talking. I haven't even charged her for this. Just talking on the phone. And as we were talking today, it was like part 3 of her story, big, long, convoluted story of how she got to where she is now. And I'm more than happy to just listen. And she sent me a giant thank you email of just like, nobody's ever listened like that. I'm like, well, that's what my job is. That's where we have to start, is hear your story and hear what you've done in the past and how you got to where you are now. So yeah, getting them to create that relationship with you is huge, so that we can empower and understand and relate to them on a much different level. I joke with interns and people who shadow, like some of my favorite cases are when I can get somebody to cry, who is in that emotional, psychological, or cognitive or social distribution of pain, or that's kind of a big driving factor of the pain that they're feeling, which is real, right? Um, I don't want to be construed as saying like, oh, it's all in their head. Like, even if it is all in their head, great, let's work on that too, right? But if I can get a patient to cry, usually that's a huge release and kind of brings things to reality of like, this is something we need to work on too, especially if there's somebody who like doesn't get it. One of the coolest cases that I had recently was this person who came in after a stroke, and she was just saying, like, I just want to walk like a normal person, or more normal again. I'm like, whoa, 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 stop there for a second. Like, you are a normal person. You're just a normal person who had a stroke. And she just started the water work, started bawling. And she's like, thank you. Like, that means more than you know, because she was living with this identity of a non-normal person. And and we weren't even working on pain, we're working on performance with her. But part of the lack of performance or hindrance of increasing her performance was this overwhelming feeling that she wasn't normal. Imagine feeling that way, like as you live your life, not feeling normal. That's awful to me. But um, getting towards the touch science aspect of things, there's a cool happening in research right now called caressing touch, and without being creepy. Again, enter the communication there of being caressing without being creepy. And I had another cool case, just to bring up some examples for you guys around pain science, where this individual has been using a Theragun and foam rollers and seeking providers who do ART, which is fantastic. I do pin and stretch. I don't hold a certification anymore, so I can't say that I do ART. But it's all stuff that I would have advocated for somebody else, right? With her, all I did was take a dry brush and go back and forth for 2 minutes, go through some active range, passive range, ISO, eccentrics, dry brush for another 2 minutes, same thing, dry brush, same thing, dry brush, same thing. And adding that in, we did it for probably about 12, 15 minutes. Adding that in, it had an immediate reduction of pain, especially on this arc of her shoulder that she was feeling it. Traumatic injury to her shoulder and a lot of hardware and surgeries that went into that. And really this hyper guarding emotionally around her shoulder. But if we could just provide that soft caressing touch, like mama's kisses on your boo-boo, it really opened up a different level to her brain to understand and acknowledge her pain a little bit differently. And I guess segue to that is ultimately pain's just an attention signal. It's trying to get your attention and say, knock, knock, Puddinhead, do something different, because this isn't the right way to do it. It's trying to change that pattern or that movement aberrancy, if we want to call it that, to be more optimal, which is what we should be doing, right? It's kind of like a habit loop of cue, routine, reward without the reward. So if we can change the cue maybe change the routine, right? Which goes against the habit loop, but we want to change the routine, not the cue. But yeah, if we could change that up and just interject that vicious cycle at any point, we can get huge wins. Next one on the list is ski and snowboard issues, injuries, topics, etc. I grew up in this world, for those who didn't know. So I grew up competing in snowboarding. I wasn't great by any means, but I was okay. A lot of competitions, a lot of fun, a lot of injuries on my part. But one of the biggest under realizations of the athletes, so from the outsider's perspective, is that especially snowboarding, like everybody thinks, oh, snowboarders are just a bunch of pot smoking, blah, 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 hipster, blah, blah, whatever. Like whatever you want to think of that. And same thing with some skiers, but um, the misnomer in the public perception is the mind work that needs to go in to these athletes. Skiing and snowboarding is a mental sport, big time. I've got skiing on the TV right now as I'm recording this, watching the Olympics. But and dare we even extrapolate that into one of the biggest underutilized tactics with these athletes is the mental side of things, and maybe even talking about breath work and just mind readiness preparatory stuff. So it's a huge mental sport, and then you add on an injury or an issue on top of that, then you take away their identity as a skier, as a snowboarder. Now we get back into the biopsychosocial talk. I mean, it's an awesome sport. It's an awesome lifestyle. I lived it for a couple years out in Colorado, and I guess as I was younger too. But yeah, I guess I don't know what the individual wanted me to talk about with injuries, like don't go break a leg or an arm. But yeah. Next one on the list, gait assessment. Where do we start? So to start, reach out to Courtney Conley and learn everything you can from her. But aside from that, where to start is just start. Kind of like starting a business, or one of the questions on here, starting a podcast or course creation. Just start. Even if you don't have a treadmill, you have an iPhone or a phone of some sort, just take videos and give yourself some time, especially if you don't know where to exactly look first. Don't start diving through that video that you just recorded with your patient while they're watching it too, because you might not know exactly what the issue is with their gait or what to look for even. So take a day or two, dissect that, then set up another meeting with that person or maybe a phone call and go over it with them. Hey, after I looked at your video in slow motion, I started seeing that you're driving through your right pinky toe on toe off, or in stance phase, I could see your hips doing this. And another thing with that is look for the big elephants first. Take the low hanging fruit first. The small elephants in the room or the little minutia issues that they might be dealing with, you'll get better at understanding those with time. But take the big things first. If somebody's lacking hip extension, if we're looking at them from the side, you'll see that very easily. And then one last thing on that is, don't just think about visuals, like I just said, with a video camera or your phone video, or just watching them walk back and forth. Close your eyes for a second too. Like I have a treadmill here, and one of the biggest things I can do is close my eyes and just listen to them run or walk for a little bit. And if you hear a thump, 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 like clearly they're doing something on one side or the other, because my eyes are closed, so I don't know which side. And just that audible change of gait patterns, or potentially inefficient gait patterns, will jump out at you that way. So use all your senses. Next one here, functioning as a PT. Oh, so you're functioning as a PT, but you're a chiro? What? There's nothing in my scope that says that I can't load people, right? There's nothing in my scope that says I can't have turf and blaring rap music and a squat rack and almost make this a workout, right? So why not? Okay. A little backstory: my shoulders suck, and so dislocated my left one way too many times. Again, grew up snowboarding. AC separation on my left side, right shoulder. There's a lot of. I played volleyball in college. Yeah, I was that person. So a lot of swinging stuff that my right shoulder is just kind of meh. There's no major issues with that, but it's just nagging. So there's no way that I could side posture 60 patients in a day. I'm just not built for that. So that's kind of how I got interested into the exercise portion of what I do now. Is actually I couldn't do 60 patients in a day. I couldn't work with that. There's no way I could physically hold up for that. So I got interested in that way. But I think the biggest thing I can say on this topic is I highly advocate that regardless of your profession, you start to push the boundaries of your scope and start working towards the edges of your scope of practice as much as you can, because that's where we see the fringe, right? The potentially biggest benefits, or speaking of elephants in the room, like that's where we not only get the big elephant in the room, but also the little elephants too, which truly brings that person to optimal performance. I mean, who says that a massage therapist has to get every single patient naked and on the table for 60 minutes, right? Put their clothes on, watch them squat, especially if the issue that they're experiencing was due to squatting, right? If I go into my massage therapist and I'm like, yeah, I was squatting and I hurt my back, let's see your squat. And back to the kind of where to start things is like, look at the big elephants in the room with that squat. If their knees are crashing in, if they're tilting really far forward, if they're, I don't know, wiggling their right ear, like pick up on those things. And then you can get them naked and work on them for a little bit. But, push the boundaries of your scope is the big thing. Office music playlist. Can I have yours? This one's hilarious. Play whatever the heck you want to play. To me, like in here, we bump everything from Mamas and the Papas to Stu and Sly and the Family Stone to we had Elvis going on the other day, or at least I did. We got Biggie and Tupac, Taylor Swift, some pop, some country. Like there's everything going on here. I mean, we have the one time I was playing, it was Biggie and Miley Cyrus mashup, and I have a patient who's a pastor showed up, and he's like, "Did he just say what I think he said?" I'm like, "Oh, yep, Alexa next," kind of thing. But hopefully Alexa doesn't play here now. But yeah, so like maybe turn the station to something a little bit more relevant for the person who's coming in, but uh, listen to anything because, or I do at least, because when I'm functioning as me, some days, mornings, right, I might listen to some more acoustic stuff. Afternoons, if we've got a couple like workout sessions in a row with some patients, I'm going to bump something a little bit more happy and going, right? But if you aren't functioning at your best, you're not going to be providing at your best. And I think that also makes us human and it makes us more relatable to our patients. Uh, I had a patient in the other day and she goes, I think I've listened to every single genre that's alive just coming into this office. I'm like, yeah, well, it's kind of what I'm into. So sorry. But we had a great conversation about that. And I found out a lot of cool things that she was interested in because of that. So next one on the list, content creation, both social media and courses is where I'm taking this. But one quick thing is the only reason I started an Instagram account was to have a link to send to patients for their exercises. Which, disclaimer, that's why I highly recommend none of you guys, if you're following me on Instagram, do anything that I actually put on there. Because those exercises were derived as a prescriptive, with air quotes around that, for a specific person or persons down the line if it works for somebody else. But now, with that being said, like I use my Instagram now for a lot of things. I share my family, my dog, house renovations, fishing, travels, everything on there because I'm human. Kind of like the question we just brought up about the music. Um, it allows me to be potentially more relatable to those who are interested in relating with me. Right? That's what social media is for. Um, I do get a little caught up with that sometimes, and I'll kind of go in spurts. But content creation should be pretty simple. Like I think put anything and everything out there, and much like anything, just start. If you think somebody's gonna bash you for what you put out there because you said peroneus instead of fibularis, like screw those people. Just put it out there anyways, and speak to your crowd, right? As for course creation, a little quick background with my influence, my incorporation. I don't know what the right word is here. My working with rock tape, right? So I started working with rock tape about 5 years ago. The last 2 years is when I really started putting out my own courses and start thinking more on my own content creation in that realm. Rock tape definitely took a leaping faith at me because I hate public speaking. I remember like I took a public speaking course in college and it absolutely scared the crap out of me. But for some reason, when you're passionate about something, it's a little easier to speak to people who in attendance are also passionate about it, right? So I learned that I'm actually okay at teaching. Apparently, they've kept me around at least and say good things, so I'm taking their credit or taking their word for it. But with my own coursework, is really where things get interesting. Like when I teach for rock tape, obviously I'm fully bought in and biased 100% here, but I love what Capo's doing. I love what Ethan's doing. I love what the whole team is doing. Skills, trigger point, all of it, right? And I'm fully in their thought camp of philosophy of care. But what I'm doing when I'm speaking for them is speaking for them. I'm just a talking head. I didn't create any of that content. I have no say in what gets changed with it. I'm just a speaking head, or I have input to the say, but I don't ultimately get to make any major decisions there. creating my own stuff is where things get fun because I get to talk about whatever the heck I want to talk about. I've got a shoulder course out now that's been out for, I guess, almost 2 years now. We've got a hip course coming up, a short version, a long version, home exercise compliance program, and some other stuff coming down the pipeline. But to start with that, for anybody who's interested, I would start by doing lunch and learns as like marketing events per se, but more so just getting comfortable teaching. And teaching is different than speaking, right? Teaching is actually getting engagement and people to retain information. Speaking at them is like when your dad yells at you for missing the, game-winning run in baseball when you're 9, and I still remember it because it was sad. Yeah, get your practice in, get your reps in, speak to your local gym, host events at your clinic if you can, things like that. And as to what to talk about, whatever you're passionate about. If you think you have a huge knowledge base in blah 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 subject, teach on that. Or what I did, this is where my shoulder course got derived from, is I was very confused about it, right? I didn't think I was a great shoulder clinician or provider. And specifically, I had 2 cases in a row that I'd been working with for like 2 months ish. And things were getting better, don't get me wrong. They just weren't progressing as I had thought they were, with me doing everything that I thought I was doing or thought would be right. And so I was very confused. I'm like, you know what? Selfishly, I'm going to dive into this and learn more about the shoulder. And then through that, I think I got smarter, obviously. But I got really passionate about the shoulder. And then I was like, hey, I want to share this information with everybody else. Boom, coursework, right? So that's kind of somewhere to begin with that. Next one on the list is IT band rehab. I wrote a whole article on this one at one point, like years ago, that somewhere got published, but I don't know where it is. It was called "It's Just a Band." So like it's just a band. The best thing is to acknowledge why or how that IT band became an issue. The IT band is usually a victim area, not a culprit area, and I'll talk about that here more in a second. But the IT band's supposed to be tight. It's just a band. Depending on the research that you want to buy into, at most, from what I've found, this is long ago, so it might have changed. This is just the research that I have stuck in my brain. The biggest capacity for that IT band to stretch on a normal individual is about 0.9 centimeters, so just less than 1 centimeter. That's not that far, right? It's actually pretty far anatomically, but it's supposed to be tight, okay? So trying to mobilize that or stretch your tight IT band is probably not the case. Rather, again, we need to figure out who's the culprit for this. Generally speaking, I look higher up into the hip and the surrounding musculature up there. Things like the TFL, glute med are 2 great places to start. And what I peek at is the AROM and PROM of those areas. So if their active range and their passive range have a huge discrepancy between them, let's say 50 degrees or 80 degrees or something god-awful like that, that's probably where you found your biggest elephant in the room. And usually that is the case where AROM and PROM don't match up with IT band issues. But again, it might not be the only culprit, but it's a good starting point. After that, we can look down into the foot, ankle complex, big toe, and look for the smaller elephants in the room potentially. But proximal stability begets distal mobility. So I would start there. Why should I squat often, and what about below parallel is how I'm interpreting this question. People squat a lot more than they think. I always make the joke with people when they say like, oh, you only work with athletes, I'm not an athlete. I'm like, well, do you poop? Because if you poop, you squat, and therefore you're an athlete, right? Which usually gets a good chuckle, but dad jokes. But really, squatting is a foundational movement, a movement pattern, and we must do it well, and we must do it often, and we do it more often than we think. There's many different certain camps of theory on what a perfect squat looks like, and I'm not in any of those camps. I think there's no such thing as a perfect squat. Take a Olympic weightlifter who's squatting 450 pounds. If they're in competition, they must break parallel in order to be counted as a rep, versus a hockey goalie who is sitting in net for 60 minutes. Now, they're not squatting for 60 minutes because sometimes the puck's on the other side of the sheet, but they're both in a squat pattern. And a hockey goalie is in complete genu-valgum when he's trying to block a shot, trying to get those pads together, blockers together, whereas a Olympic weightlifter is in like what we would call perfect position or perfect squatting form, below parallel, knees past toes or not. I mean, there's so many different camps that it almost muddles the waters and makes things way more confusing than they should be. I think a great conceptual course for this is selfishly, or I guess I'm not an owner of this, but like selfishly, I think Rock Tape's movement specialist course is fantastic for throwing all the perfectionism and idealism out the window. They go through a bunch of different screening assessment breakouts of figuring out what the squat pattern that is perfect for the individual is, right? Where should we place our feet? Because depending on which coach, Mike Boyle to Gray Cook to anybody, like you stick all those heads in the same room and they're going to argue about it should be 45 degrees of foot placement, 45 external rotation versus 0 degrees versus it has to be at 15 to 12 degrees. I mean, there's so many different theories and camps of what a perfect squat looks like. And it depends on that person's morphology, their intent, their goals, their history, their timeline. Are they a younger athlete and this is the first time they've squatted? Are they an older athlete and they might not have that many squats left in their life? It totally depends on so many different factors. So, but at the end of the day, yes, squat often and try to go through a variability of range of motion. Squat to your left, squat to your right, aka Cossack squats or Cossack squats, however you want to say that. Do Spanish squats, do assisted squats, do weighted squats, do negative squats, do ass to grass, do everything, okay? How to get started podcasting. Much like anything, just start, right? Like that's the biggest step is just start. But for me, I use Anchor FM to drop everything, which goes to Spotify and everywhere else you can find Apple Podcasts, everything like that. But I prefer to edit and chop up my stuff into a different software. So if you're really interested, hit me up and I can show you. I've got a fancy microphone and cool video quality and stuff like that. You don't need that. The first couple that I recorded, I just recorded straight into my iPhone and with video on. So you don't need that much stuff to get started. It's just, what quality are you looking for? The biggest piece of advice that I can give somebody is hone your niche. Like find the demographic and the topic that you really want to talk about and talk about that. Now, I'm not a great example for this because if you've been listening to my podcast, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of whatever the hell you guys want to listen to, which is what today's is. We've got I'm the host. We've got guests from many different camps and theories and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm helter skelter. My niche is human movement. Anybody who's interested in human movement, I think, understands this podcast and the topics we discuss. But yeah, the one thing that is not asked here whatsoever about getting started, but I think is important to bring up is guests. And speaking of that, ask everybody. It's surprising how nice people are, especially in 2022 here. But I've only ever had one person say no, and it was a totally understandable excuse. It was like contractual obligations of information shared, so they just couldn't do it. But I've asked some pretty cool people who I've never met, some of them, people who I thought had not enough time in the day to take some time away to talk to little old me kind of thing. And everybody else has said yes, which is pretty cool. So, and I'm not important either. So it's, again, I didn't even know some of these people. Entering the elite space and staying there. So this question came from a U.S. Olympic Committee doc. He's been around the block a time or two and it's pretty cool. So I don't know how to answer this better than he would, but I will say this. I'm fortunate to work with some high moving athletes or high level athletes. And the biggest thing I can say is there's zero difference treating a professional athlete or a high elite level athlete versus a weekend warrior, right? Or a grandma. Like they're all human, they're all people, they all have history and stuff going on the side and stressors and good things and bad things. I mean, they're just people, okay? So that's the biggest thing I can say. I'm fortunate to have been fallen into a role of being able to work with a couple of these athletes, but yeah, they're just people, I think the biggest thing compounding upon that is to take a page out of Eric Cressy's book and his partner Pete's book is find your optimal client. If you want to work with elite athletes, so to answer the question of staying there, if you want to work with elite athletes or athletes in general or grandmas or kids or whoever your avatar is that you want to work with, find that optimal client or patient, over deliver times 10, just hammer everything you can do, aka do your job, and then rinse and repeat, right? That's not a simple or easy process, meaning that like if you expected a secret recipe of how to like get booked with just athletes or just grandmas or whatever it is, there isn't one, right? You just have to do your job over and over and over and over and over again, and things will grow, okay? So that's actually the last question, except for one doofus. You know who you are. who said, "Why do you always look so gorgeous?" Well, to you, I say thank you and I love you, and it's not my wife. So if somebody can like guess who that doofus is, I'll give you two high fives the next time I see you. But yeah, great questions from everybody here. I love. I've never done one of these kind of things, and ask me anything sort of Reddit thing, but it was really interesting and really fun. You guys had a lot of fun questions and kind of challenged me in my understanding of what I do for a living too. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. As always, like, subscribe, share, do all that fun stuff. Hit me up if you guys have any questions or want to bash me on any of my thoughts that I just shared with you. But these are just my opinions. I'm entitled to my own opinion. They might be wrong. That's fine. I'm just entitled to it. So call me again, 2022. Call me entitled. But no, thank you everybody, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And look forward to the next podcast dropping here with an awesome, awesome guest to give you a little teaser for 2 weeks to come. But have a good one.